Welcome back to Deck Tech for Decks. I'm your host Caleb. Today we are building Sin Sparas Punishment, and this 7 CMC monster does exactly what you need a 7 CMC monster to do in today's day and age of Magic. Whenever it enters the battlefield or attacks, you get to exile a random permanent card from your graveyard and then create a token copy of that. If it's a land, you get to repeat the process, so you're guaranteed to get something good here. Now this build around is going to focus around weird stuff we can do with land tokens. Remember, we're building tokens, right? So if we can double up on those, we can do some really absurd stuff. So Second Harvest becomes a ramp spell that also has a couple combo-y things we can do, especially if we have something like an Eternal Witness that's a token copy. So now you cast Second Harvest, you get 4 lands that are tokens, and then you get an Eternal Witness copy that returns Second Harvest back to your hand. That's infinite mana, infinite tokens, infinite lands, right? We can do some really weird stuff here. Now we're not going to focus solely on combo. This is essentially just going to be a deck that utilizes a lot of weird cards that are not really all that good. Everybody hates exiling cards from their graveyard, but whenever we're exiling cards we don't want to reanimate, it's pretty good with this commander. For that reason, we get to use the escape mechanic, and it's actually really broken here. Get rid of that Birds of Paradise in your graveyard, that way we can for sure hit that Nyxbloom Ancient. If that sounds like a deck tech you guys want to get into, stay tuned. But don't forget to click on that whatnot link and claim your free $15. Additionally, you guys can get 10% off all of your Tolarian library proxies whenever you use code DT4D. And last but not least, don't forget to like, comment, and subscribe. I know it's annoying to ask, but it really does help the channel, and I appreciate it. And to show my appreciation, everybody that comments on the first day, I will be sure to reply to those comments. Now let's get right into the deck tech. Let's talk about the draw of this commander real quick, right? What separates him from the Mudratha of the world? This guy enters the battlefield and creates tokens, which I think is pretty unique because that gives us the ability to populate some pretty broken things, like a doubling season, right? As long as we got a token of a doubling season, we can populate it, and now we have 3 doubling seasons. And then, you know, it just gets more and more insane from there. There's a lot of videos going over the math, but I think you get it. The mass draw to this guy is that broken attack trigger and ETB, and honestly, I think the fact that he makes tokens can be more powerful in some scenarios. So let's abuse that. Second Harvest becomes a commander unique combo piece to Sin. And honestly, I know combo gets a bad rap, but I just think it's so cool whenever there's a combo that's around a specific commander that's really hard to duplicate outside of the deck. So let's talk about how this works. Second Harvest is 4 CMC, and it says for each token you control, create a token that's a copy of that permanent. Now, what we need in order for this to work and go infinite is a bunch of land tokens, which honestly, it can create on its own. You can start this loop with just 2 land tokens, and then eventually you'll get 4, 8. You know, we're doubling it every time we're casting Second Harvest. And there's a couple ways we can return Second Harvest back to our hand. One of them is by casting Second Harvest if we have a token copy of Eternal Witness or Timeless Witness. Notably, Timeless Witness can actually eternalize from the graveyard, giving us a 4/4 token of her. So that gets rid of that barrier out of the gate. Another thing we can use is Deadeye Navigator. Since we're generating a ton of this mana, as long as we're able to blink our Eternal Witness with Deadeye Navigator, we're still able to return Second Harvest to our hand and recast it, and you're going to end up being net positive in mana at some point. From there, there's a plethora of different ways we can end the game. I personally went with Sir Conrad because this guy's just stupid in this deck. For 5 CMC, you get a legendary creature that says whenever another creature dies or a creature card is put into a graveyard from anywhere other than the battlefield or a creature card leaves your graveyard, Sir Conrad deals 1 damage to each opponent. And then he has an activated ability, 1 and a black, each player mills a card. So you just mill everybody's library out and kill the entire table. This guy's not only extremely broken in this deck, but he's just really good as a finisher. And I hear you guys, infinite combos are lame, so give me a combo or something interesting that's not infinite. I got you. What if we have a token copy of Nyxbloom Ancient? Then we're able to copy it with something like Selesnya Eulogist. Now we can tap her for 3 mana, exile a creature card from a graveyard, and populate, and now we have 2 Nyxbloom Ancients that's going to allow our lands to tap for 9 mana, because remember, Nyxbloom Ancient allows all of our permanents to tap for triple the amount of mana we would originally tap them for. Now that we have 9 mana, let's exile, I don't know, 3 more cards from our opponent's graveyard or our graveyard, and then we're able to generate a total of 3 more Nyxbloom Ancients. Now we have 5. Now whenever we tap a land for mana, we're going to generate 243 mana. Not infinite, but it's gonna be enough. From there, we get to play some super unique cards you wouldn't play in any other sultai deck because you don't want to actively exile cards out of your graveyard. But From the Catacombs is especially good in this deck. For 5 CMC, you get a sorcery that says put target creature card from a graveyard onto the battlefield under your control with a corpse counter on it. You take the initiative. If that creature would leave the battlefield, exile it instead of putting it anywhere else. And then this card has Escape, which is an ability that says for 5 mana, the same as the casting cost, you get to exile 5 other cards from your graveyard, and you can cast this card from your graveyard. These cards are just going to be super synergistic with our commander. We're able to get stuff like Bloom Tinder out of our graveyard and ensure that we're going to get that broken Nyxbloom Ancient instead whenever we attack with our commander and get his broken ability. The Grim Captain's Locker is also going to be super broken in this strategy. For 4 CMC, you get a legendary artifact that taps and says Surveil 1, or you can tap it and say until end of turn, each creature card in your graveyard gains Escape, 3 generic and 1 black, and then exile 4 other cards from your graveyard. So not only is this a way to cheat cost because we're running a lot of very expensive creatures in this deck, additionally, it does the whole escape thing that gets rid of the useless cards in our graveyard. Kotis Sibsig Champion. Kind of the same thing here. He does 2 things that I like. He's 3 CMC in Sultai colors, a legendary creature zombie warrior, and says once during each of your turns, you may cast a creature spell from your graveyard by exiling 3 other cards from your graveyard in addition to paying the cost. He also says whenever 1 or more creatures you control enter, if 1 or more of them entered from the graveyard or it was cast from the graveyard, put 2 1/1 counters on Kotis. So he gets big and can cast things from the graveyard. I love this guy here because maybe we want to cast our Bloom Tinder from the graveyard. So we can cast our Bloom Tinder, we're not going to reanimate it with our commander, and then we're also going to get rid of 3 other cards that we didn't want to reanimate with him as well. So it kind of gets 2 birds with 1 stone. We get the value and we don't get a lackluster trigger from our commander. Titan's Nest has to be one of the best cards in the deck. For 4 CMC, 1 generic, and then Sultai, you get an enchantment that says at the beginning of your upkeep, look at the top card of your library. You may put that card into your graveyard. Then it has an ability, exile a card from your graveyard, add 1 generic, spend this mana only to cast colored spells without X in their mana cost. So now we can tailor our graveyard to reanimate exactly what we want. We exile every creature we don't want to reanimate, leave all the lands because we want those on the battlefield as tokens, and then we cast our commander super early, reanimating something like a Nyxbloom Ancient or, I don't know, an AC to get a ton of advantage out of nowhere. Uro, Titan of Nature's Wrath, 1 blue, 1 green, 1 generic, legendary creature Elder Giant, and says whenever Uro enters the battlefield, sacrifice it unless it escapes. Whenever Uro enters the battlefield or attacks, you gain 3 life, draw a card, and then you may put a land card from your hand onto the battlefield, and then its escape cost is 2 green, 2 blue, exile 5 other cards from your graveyard. I love playing Uro with all of our sacrifice effects, like Ruthless Technomancer. This guy's a 6/6 for 3 mana. So if we escape him, we're sculpting our graveyard, and then we can just slam Ruthless Technomancer on the battlefield to generate 6 treasure tokens, because Ruthless Technomancer enters the battlefield, sacrifice a creature, you get that many treasure tokens equal to their power. We're also on Greater Good effects, we're on Altar of Dementia. I love to cast this guy, sacrifice him, and fill the graveyard, get a ton of advantage. Hogak does this just as well, if not better. This guy's an 8/8 for 7 mana that says you cannot spend mana to cast this spell. He has Convoke and Delve, which means we can either tap our creatures to cast him or exile cards from our graveyard. So not only can we cast this guy from our graveyard, he sculpts our graveyard, he's also just massive and really fuels the Power Matters value engines, like our Greater Good, our Altar of the Wretched, our Altar of Dementia, and our Ruthless Technomancers of this deck. 6 hits it from the same area as Kotis hits it from, right? But this guy's just way more flexible. He's going to allow us to not only mill whenever he attacks, he mills 3 cards, but also he says as long as it's your turn, non-land cards in your graveyard have retrace. So now we can discard land cards to cast permanent spells from our graveyard. Super powerful here. We're putting lands in the graveyard to get reanimated by our commander, and then additionally we're going to be able to cast our signets and our little small creatures from the graveyard. That way our commander doesn't reanimate them and we still get the value from them. Mudratha does something very similar. For 6 CMC, you get get a legendary creature elemental avatar that allows you to play lands from your graveyard and cast permanent spells from your graveyard, but only one permanent type per turn. So you can cast one creature, one artifact, one enchantment, and this is very useful for the same reason 6 is useful. We're able to get those small things out of our graveyard, still get the value from them, and again, we're not going to feel like we whiffed off our commander trigger. Moving on to more synergistic pieces, we have Life Finds a Way. For 3 CMC, you get an enchantment that says whenever a non-token creature with power 4 or greater enters the battlefield under your control, you get to populate, which means you can create a token copy of a creature we control. Notably, we are on not only Displacer Kitten, but we're on Deadeye Navigator as well. That's going to mean we can blink our commander a ton. Displacer Kitten is going to allow us to blink our commander, or any permanent for that matter, whenever we cast a non-creature spell. Deadeye Navigator allows us to exile the creature it's paired up to, and we're going to soulbound it to our commander 9 times out of 10. This is going to, again, just get us a ton of commander triggers and get super broken whenever you pair it with Life Finds a Way, because we're populating while we're doing that as well. Parallel Lives and Adrix and Nev are going to be awesome in this deck. They're just going to double up on all of the token generations. Double the treasure tokens is also quite busted here. Tireless Provisioner and Lotus Cobra are insane here. We're putting a ton of lands onto the battlefield, but 9 times out of 10, whenever they come with our commander, they're going to be tapped. Now we can use the mana right away through Lotus Cobra and Tireless Provisioner effects. Notably, Tireless Provisioner is better because the attack trigger of our commander is going to make it to where we really can't utilize the Lotus Cobra mana unless we're blinking our commander. Portal to Phyrexia is just a giant artifact we can reanimate with our commander. Remember, he doesn't just reanimate creatures, he reanimates permanents, which is super busted because now we can get a Portal to Phyrexia that says when Portal of Phyrexia enters the battlefield, each opponent sacrifices 3 creatures. Then at the beginning of your upkeep, put target creature card from a graveyard onto the battlefield under your control. It's a Phyrexian in addition to its other types. Pretty broken ability, right? But this card is 9 mana. Good thing we're not going to be spending that. Colossal Grave Reaver, another broken card for 8 mana. This is a dragon with flying and says whenever this creature enters or attacks, mill 3 cards. Then whenever one or more creature cards is put into the graveyard from your library, put them onto the battlefield instead. This guy's absolutely insane and will win you the game. Especially if you have Altar of Dementia on the battlefield, I found that as long as you're playing enough big bodies, which this deck definitely is, you can kind of just sack one creature, mill 5 cards, get another big creature off of those 5 cards you milled, and then keep going off. This will result in you finding the key pieces you need to win the game. Tevel the Balance Scale. Not only did this seem like some solid mill, because this guy says whenever Tevel attacks, mill 3 cards, then you may return a land card from your graveyard to the battlefield tapped. He also makes a massive board state with this commander, because he also says whenever one or more cards leaves your graveyard, create a 2/2 black zombie druid creature token. Now normally this doesn't work in mass, right? If we reanimate 5 creatures all at once, Tevel will trigger once. But since our commander says exile a permanent card from your graveyard at random, then create a tap token that's a copy of that card. If that card is a land, repeat this process. That means every time we resolve his ability, it's 1 trigger from Tevel. Because if it's a land, oh, we got to repeat the process. That's a second trigger. If it's another land, oh, we got to repeat the process. That's a second trigger. So even though Tevel only triggers whenever we mass reanimate once, every single trigger from Sin is a single trigger, if that makes sense. So we're going to get a ton of zombies off of this. It basically says whenever you get a land off Sin's trigger, just go ahead and throw a zombie on the battlefield. Hedron Crab is absolutely broken. It says whenever a land enters the battlefield under your control, you get to mill 3 cards. Pair this with our giant Colossal Grave Reaver, and you're basically going to win the game, especially if you're doing crazy stuff like, I don't know, making token copies of your lands. Shigeki Jukai Visionary has become a mainstay in my mill decks, and he's not going anywhere. You guys will get bored of this card. 2 CMC, legendary enchantment creature Snake Druid. You get a creature with a broken tap ability that's 2 mana that says return Shigeki to its owner's hand. Reveal the top 4 cards of your library. You may put a land card from among them onto the battlefield tapped. Put the rest into your graveyard. And then he has a channel ability that allows you to discard him and return cards from your graveyard to your hand. So not only does he get the cards that you don't need to mill, he also just mills cards, which I love. Ripples of Undeath is an insane card draw and mill engine. I love to see it in my opener. For 2 CMC, you get an enchantment that says, at the beginning of your pre-combat main phase, mill 3 cards. Then you may pay 1 and 3 life. If you do, put that card from among those into your hand. So now you're getting to put cards that you milled into your hand. I don't know how many times I've milled something off of Cemetery Tampering, which we're also running in this deck, and really just thought, shoot, I needed that in my hand. And now we get a card that does exactly the same thing for 1 less mana and allows you to put it in your hand. This card's just insane. If you guys were on the Ripples of Undeath train while this thing was $2, welcome to the club. Sadly, people are figuring it out, and yeah, this price has shot up. Out of the Tombs, one of my favorite combo pieces. It's 3 mana and says at the beginning of your upkeep, put 2 Eon counters on Out of the Tombs, then mill a card for each number of Eon counters on it. If you would draw a card while you have no cards in your library, instead return a creature card from your graveyard to the battlefield, you can't lose the game. So all you need something is like Sir Conrad if you have no library, and then you can just keep reanimating a creature, keep throwing a creature to the graveyard with a sack outlet, and then you reanimate a creature again. As long as you have a way to draw cards in between, there's like, I don't know, with a elemental bond that we're running in the deck, you're able to drain the entire table out. Overlord of Belmurk for 5 CMC, you get an enchantment creature Avatar Horror with Impending 5. This basically just means you can cast it for cheaper, and then in 5 turns it actually turns into a creature. But if you pay the full 5 mana, you get a creature that says whenever Overlord of Belmurk enters the battlefield or attacks, you get to mill 4 cards. Then you may return a non-avatar creature card or a planeswalker card from your graveyard to your hand. Super useful. Hermit Druid is also in the house. This guy mills a ton of cards here because we are on a minimal amount of basics. For 1 and a green, you can tap this guy to reveal cards from the top of your library until you reveal a basic land, and then put the card into your hand and all the other cards revealed this way into your graveyard. Essentially mass mill that doesn't count as mill. Pretty broken. Titania, Protector of Argoth, and Sylvan Safekeeper. These cards are amazing in this deck. Sylvan Safekeeper says sacrifice a land, target creature you control gains Shroud until end of turn. And then Titania is a 5 CMC legendary creature elemental that says whenever Titania, Protector of Argoth, enters the battlefield, return target land card from your graveyard to the battlefield. And then it says whenever a land you control is put into a graveyard from the battlefield, create a 5/3 green elemental creature token. This is insane because what we're going to do is we're going to get Tatiana and then Sylvan Safekeeper on the battlefield, cast our commander, and in response to his ETB, we're going to sacrifice all of our lands. This is going to make it to where our commander reanimates all of those lands and we're left with a massive board state. Notably, make sure you clear your board of creatures before you do this because you don't want to end up with no lands and accidentally get the creature on the first try. That would be messed up. It also works for his attack trigger as well, but on the attack trigger, you don't get to then attack with them because we are running some haste enablers like Finale of Devastation. It's not on the Game Changer list and it takes 10 mana to activate, so I went ahead and sent it. Super broken card, but hey, we needed haste, and running Concordant Crossroads here is so risky because if it ends up in our graveyard and we accidentally reanimate it, our opponents could kind of just run away with the game if we're not ready to have haste.